some of the other applications that Bernard Eastlund spoke about might actually be quite useful. One of those applications were the idea of using a resonant frequency, a frequency that was tuned to the same frequency as, say, ozone, in a way that would create more ozone in the ozone layer. Or in another instance, he believed that you could create nitrogen over areas that needed it for agriculture, or in another instance where you could destroy pollutants within the atmosphere using pulsed radio frequency, hitting those specific frequencies unique to those elements. Now, those are good applications, and applications that we certainly ought to explore, but they ought to be explored within the context of a non-military science, a science that goes beyond the bounds of weapon systems. More than that, let's talk a little bit about some of the other physiological effects and what's been discovered about non-ionizing low levels of radiation and their effect on living organisms. In every living person, there's a number of elements that are in non-toxic levels that if the levels were higher, they could create toxic effects. Iodine, for example. High levels of iodine will create a toxic effect. Low levels are unnoticeable. They won't create any problems whatsoever. But if you send in a pulsed radio frequency that resonates with or vibrates with that element, that chemical, what it creates is the effect of having ingested a large amount. In other words, a toxic effect. And yet it's a small amount. So when they do the blood work on you, they say, oh, there's no problem here. We can't understand why you're manifesting this illness. And yet within your system is enough iodine to create the effect. The effect of that is you're ill. You have all the symptoms of iodine poisoning without any chemicals showing up in your body. As a weapons effect, that's interesting. But as an effect for a side effect, it certainly could be quite damaging. As a physiological effect, one of the things to consider is that this same science, this idea of resonating specific frequencies for creating the same reaction to certain chemicals in your body, this is being utilized in Europe for healing purposes. So in Europe, where they're using the same basic foundational science for healing, in our country, in the United States, we're using this technology for killing. Specifically, a gentleman, Dr. Reiho Makela in Finland, is using a system of laser electroacupuncture for the purpose of stimulating energy flow through the body. It's based on non-ionizing radiations, low levels of radiation. The laser, when you feel it on your skin, feels no more than a feather tapping your skin in terms of the electrical and energy coming off of the field that surrounds the laser light itself. It's a combination of electricity and laser light, but at a low level. Enough to break skin resistance, enough to enter your body, enough to cause chemical changes that then create a change in the general state of health. The same technology, the same foundational science is applied by the military in these kinds of weapon systems in what are called non-lethal weapon systems. But non-lethal weapons are not lost on just as systems for just the military. Our Justice Department has spent a number of conferences developing this technology as well. And this is sort of the other half of the HAARP story in the sense of things we ought to be concerned about as Americans and citizens of the world, actually. The non-lethal weapons, most recently 60 Minutes, just a few weeks ago, showed a radio frequency weapon system used to make people have symptoms of flu-like symptoms or seasick symptoms where you're totally disoriented. This is an important issue because these kinds of weapons, as they're applied to physiology, need to be explored, again, from a healing perspective. Electromedicine is the medicine of the future. It is what's coming. It's here in many parts of the world. In the next 10 years, we'll see more developments in this area. It's time to take that base science that the military has developed and transfer it to civilian hands. But the way they're transferring it right now, injustice. In 1985, there was a conference held by the Justice Department to explore sort of new non-lethal weapon systems, weapons that could be used for riot control purposes and other purposes by justice. What they said at that time was, the place to go for this knowledge is to the military because they have it all, but it's classified. In 1987, there was a follow-up conference. In that conference, they again discussed the idea that the military holds the technology, but they said, we're at the point where maybe we can bridge some dialogue. And in that bridging of dialogue, what they said is, but if we do this, if we're going to bring this technology over from defense purposes to domestic use, we really need to do it through an open process, a process that everyone can participate in and see so that it doesn't result in some kind of leak of information that might cause problems for the introduction of the technology. The next conference, 1993, was held and sponsored by Los Alamos Laboratories. The entire conference was classified, except for one small segment of it, which was the agenda. And within that agenda, the very leak they were looking for not happening has happened, because what they were talking about was radio frequency weapon systems for the use of manipulating human behavior. In terms of what does that mean to us, it means that Department of Defense technologies have now been transferred